Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Eyes on the Right podcast. I'm your host, Amy, and this is the podcast that uncovers all of the things purposely hidden in plain sight by the secret societies, the occultists, Hollywood, and the mystery religions of old, then ties them back to scripture to understand the real truth behind them. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. I'm really excited today. I have with me a special guest. I have Jon Pounders here from Now You See TV, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Hi, Jon. How are you?
I'm doing good, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm excited. I've been following your Instagram now for a little while. You contacted me, and you do an awesome job on that. It's a shame that the other ones that you had got shut down, but you still managed to come back from that and have a pretty handsome following, I guess you could say. Like it's awesome.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the world of censorship, right? I mean, what can you do? You
Yeah.
kind of just have to go with it. So, well, awesome. Well, I follow you as well. We had a conversation before we started recording, and I've been following you guys since you started 2016,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So,
pretty much when we got started, like really got started. I think I had a few videos on there before of, just silly stuff. And I wouldn't say silly, but we were trying to get the word out there, but it was just so funny when I look back on it. But 2016 is when I really got kind of serious with it, and that's when most people, I feel like that have been with us for a while probably remember from that. But um, I'm not telling you to go out and search some of these old videos, but there's some old skits and weird videos that we used to do on Now You See TV before that too. Did you get to see any of those?
I didn't. Now I'm
Okay,
going to go
good.
look though.
Good. I
That's
hope they're
awesome.
buried deep enough that nobody finds them, but who knows? I've had people find them and show them to me before, but
Yeah, you've got those detectives out there, man. They'll find anything,
yeah,
even
they
if it's
will.
scrubbed.
Yeah,
Um,
they will.
I love it. Well, okay, let's start there. Let's tell me a little bit about Now You See TV with David and your midnight ride and just kind of how you got to this point in your walk with Christ and set the stage for us.
Okay, so a lot of people when they see me, they think like, who in the world is this guy? Why is he even doing this? And what does he know? And so I guess just to kind of set this up, I grew up in a Christian home pretty much my entire life from the time I was little until even a little bit after high school or when I lived with my parents. And I went to a Christian school. I even went to Christian college. And through that whole time in my mind, I'm a believer. Like in my mind, I think that, but at the same time, my life is there's no fruits of that whatsoever. And once I got a little bit older and started being able to question things and kind of put things into perspective, I started studying like history, mythologies, and all of this. And so the Bible kind of became this syncretic religion that ties in with all the other religions. I believe that. I believe that Jesus was just a continuation of the other gods, the other dying gods, right? Like, a lot of people saw with zeitgeist. I believed that in my head at the time. And I also wanted to know God deeply. Like I remember, crying out to God, be like, if you're real, say something to me because I just don't know. It's hard for me to believe because, you get taught so many things when you're younger, so many lies are being fed to you, whether it's the lie of Santa Claus, even something so simple as like that simple little lie was enough for me anyway to not trust people anymore because I did believe in Santa Claus. I believed he was real. And then when I found out he wasn't, and I know this sounds so stupid, but at the same time, it was enough for me, I guess, to compile everything else to cause the lack of trust in my parents. So I started thinking of God as this mechanism of control. With Santa Claus, you better do what's right, or Santa isn't going to come visit you tonight. He's not going to come down the chimney. You got to do what's right. You got to do this, and then so I started to think of God in that way. And so all throughout, while still maintaining um, a believer, or I guess a Christian name, I guess you could say, I guess because I went to church and all that, but at the same time I was out, drinking all the time, running around with the girls and just doing whatever like, my flesh desired, I guess. And so then it got to a point to where I was like, you know what? This is all stupid. I don't have to play this game anymore. I moved out of my parents' house. I was done with I got kicked out of Bible college actually, and it wasn't for anything like too crazy, but it was just because I was just wiling out all the time. Like I remember we had this big festival, and our band at the time was going to play the headline for this festival. And at the night before, we got out and we got the golf carts and we were riding them all around the campus there. And they didn't kick us out of school until after we played the concert. But after we played the concert, they kicked us out of the school. And that was like, after that, I was like, you know what? Like, forget this. I'm just going to do whatever I want. So I started digging deeper into the flesh. Ended up, just to kind of fast forward, ended up in jail at one point, several times actually. This was like my final time that I went to jail. Hopefully, the final time that I ever go to jail. But it was the last time I went there. I was on drugs at the time, also dealing drugs, all of these different things. And so I go into jail, and for 3 days I'm in there. I'm addicted to pharmaceutical drugs. I'm addicted to like cocaine, and just various things, just anything I could get my hands on at the time. Like I tried not to go too deep into the rabbit hole with drugs, but enough that I felt like I could control myself. But I started going through withdrawals while I was in there. And I remember seeing like almost all of my friends, all of the people that I knew that I hadn't seen in a while or whatever, they were all in the jail, right? So it started feeling oddly familiar, oddly like almost too familiar. And I started thinking, this is going to be my life. I watched several family members that I had go down this path and end up in jail forever or end up dead or whatever. And I'm thinking like, this is going to be me unless I do something. I started thinking, and I'm going through these drug withdrawals. So I'm not only hallucinating, I'm trying not to fight with all the inmates because there's like 30 people in the same cell that I'm in, and everybody's just upset going through withdrawals at the same thing. And so I really, at the final third day of this, when I'm starting to kind of just come through a lot of this stuff and my mind's starting to come back, I start praying, and I think, I don't want to live this life. Everything that I've done for myself, and I've lived this life, and this is where it's led me. And I know that like, I got to do something different. I have to. And so I started crying out to God. I'm like, if you can forgive me, if you love me, if you care about me, please show me, let me know, please, and I'll follow you. I'll do whatever you want me to do, because I'm tired of this. I'm ready to move on and do something different. And so within like, not very long, I don't know how long it was because time kind of melds together in there, but it was within the same day for sure. And I get this, rap on the cell, like, and they call my name, and I go in. So, prior to this, for days, I'm going through these draws. They're trying, the detectives, they have the task force, like investigating me and my friends. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going in. They're going to try to get me to talk, do some more interviewing or whatever. So I'm like, my head's hanged. I'm like going out there, and I hear this voice saying, "Jon, what's going on, man? Like, what's gone on with you?" Because I hadn't seen this guy in a while, and I realized this was somebody I had known. Right? I'm like, this is crazy. This guy used to be in a band, used to have long dreadlocks, used to have, he didn't look like he was supposed to be a cop, right? But he was a narcotics detective, and he was a believer as well. He actually had become a believer. I think he played like his band played shows with POD. The guy from POD, Sonny from POD, actually led him to Jesus, and he had basically just shifted up his life, changed up his life 100%. And he was laying in bed. He said, he was like, look, man, he's like, I was laying in bed with my wife, and I'm chilling, and I heard your name come up on the scanner, on the detective scanner, as in being investigated. And he said that he said, God told me I have to come here and pray for you. He's like, that's all I want. I just want to come here and pray for you. And as soon as that happened, I knew like, man, this is God telling me that he cares enough about me to send somebody here to pray for me. And so like, when he prayed for me, I just felt this, I don't know how to describe it other than, it's the only time I've ever felt this in my life like this, but it was just a flood of like love, a flood of forgiveness, a flood of, and even my drug addiction, like I was no longer, like everything just wiped away. Right. And I remember just being happy for the first time. And I don't know how long, it was just amazing to me. And so from that moment forward, every day of my life, I've dedicated towards doing what's right rather than all the things that I did that were just wrong. I still have a lot of regret in my former life if I think about it. I know God's forgiven me, and sometimes it's harder to forgive ourselves, but I feel this burden to to do this because of the way I lived, and also just because I feel like other people need to know. I feel like if God can change somebody like me and really shift my whole life around. I know it's hard to believe that I was on drugs. Maybe a lot of people are like, man, you don't look like you were a drug addict. But this is, mind you, this has been nearly 15 years from now, and God's restored a lot of it. I mean, I had memory problems, all these different things, but God restored all these things, and it took time. A lot of people think that wisdom just is all of a sudden imparted to people all of a sudden, and that's not the way it works. You have to. Wisdom is one of the things the Bible tells us to go after, right? It's not something that He's just like, I'm gonna dump wisdom into your head. Yeah, spiritual wisdom maybe, but like when it comes to worldly wisdom and just wisdom about the way we live our life, it's something we have to work for. But as I progressed, did a lot of different things. Of course, at the time, like everybody wanted my help with their ministry. Like everybody wanted me to do this, or this the Star record label. Oh, we need your help doing this. Let's start this. Let's start that. So I started doing all these different things and moving through. I started to realize that the church system was corrupt, right, in a big way. After I started reading my Bible, once I started reading the Bible and reading it from start to finish, I realized that a lot of the things that I was taught weren't correct. And the reason I even believed the Bible to begin with was because of an experience that I had, right? So a lot of people don't trust the Bible. They think that it's, just whatever. But, I found God proved to me through like Torah codes and through the idea that there is literally encrypted information throughout this text that also makes sense historically, archaeologically, and every which way encoded in there. And I realized, okay, this is God telling me I need to read the Bible. But I was like, but I read the Bible and I came up with all these different things. And I saw, what happened in the church, and it just didn't make sense to me. But when I started reading it, I saw it differently. I got to Genesis 6. I saw that there's stuff in there that nobody ever really talked about. Even when I went to Bible college, they always just kind of swept aside. So I started reading that, and fast forward to, 2016, I'm doing this documentary about this. It's called the Blue House in Evansville, Indiana. And what was happening there. Did you hear about that?
Yes. Yeah. I've watched part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that I guess the show Internal Affair, maybe, I can't remember what it was called. So something, it was a popular show at the time. I think like an
Inside Edition or something, or
it's something like that. Yeah. So I saw this old Inside Edition, barely legible, going on. And also at the time I realized that, the prosecutor that was the prosecutor back then is still the prosecutor. So I'm starting to like, all these things are starting to connect. And so I realized I see this guy named David Carrico in the video because he's speaking out against this stuff and trying to help these children. And so I didn't know if he was still alive or not, but I ended up finding him and interviewing him for this documentary. And we just became friends. I was like, this guy is so like-minded with a lot of the stuff. He's got a lot of wisdom. And so we became pretty close friends. And that's, kind of to where we're at today. But during that time, it was interesting because during that documentary, God showed me so many different things. Like he showed me that as a believer, we can affect things. We can affect the way things turn out locally sometimes if we apply ourselves to do it. Because of the documentary, because of the footage that we put out, I believe this is why the prosecutor wasn't able to win the next time after being prosecutor for 20 years.
Yeah.
There was even rallies outside of the local, calling him Let Him Go Levco, because we uncovered too that he'd been letting pedophiles go all over the city and just letting them go. They'd be molested 40 kids, raped 40 kids, and they'd get like a couple years and they'd be out on bail or whatever. And this was the MO of this dude. So through this documentary, we were able to get him out and get somebody else in. And so there was a lot going on there, but that's how I met David Carrico. And that's how my life shifted, realizing that media can shift society, and realizing that it has shifted society for a long time. And it's time for us to try to do something a little bit to step in and maybe hopefully unprogram a lot of these people.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, what a story. I find myself in so much of your story as well. I kind of had a similar upbringing, and when I got sober was really when the Lord started to show me so much more. My mind got clearer. I joke with my husband. I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm smarter now. It's like I can think clear, and the Lord can restore that and renew your mind. And so there's so much hope there. I just love
Yeah.
it. And, since I've been following you too, I just see, you personally growing, Jon. You can see the transformation year after year after year, just in like how you present and how your mind kind of wraps around some of this stuff and you present it to the audience. So it's really,
Yeah,
it's
thank you.
awesome for people like myself that follow you to see kind of you growing and in the Lord and your wisdom and discernment as well. It's neat. It's neat that God can do that, right? That's the cool
Yeah.
part. So yes, I
Yeah.
remember the blue house. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it have to do with, it had to do with like pedophilia and like satanic stuff going on in there too, right? In
Yeah.
this home.
Yeah, it's really shocking. I didn't say a whole lot about it
Yeah.
because I didn't know how much you wanted to talk about, but
Oh,
I'm not gonna go too crazy, but I'll tell
yeah.
you basically the gist because a lot of people can't even stomach the idea of this. But the gist of it was these children from different schools were being taken out of the schools by the I guess the superintendent principal over many of these schools to this blue house where they were conducting satanic rituals on these children. There was sacrifice going on, and they uncovered this through, I guess, interviewing different children. So the interesting thing about this was none of the children knew each other at all. Like they were different schools, didn't know each other from Adam. There was a psychiatrist who she was the psychiatrist for University of Southern Indiana, and which is a university psychiatrist, and she interviewed each of these children separately, and she noted that each one of them had an identical scar on their arms, and she believed these children 100%. The former um, district attorney believed these children as well and actually took up their case for free. He ended up dead, by the way. But what was happening is they were being taken out, doing these rituals to them, and I got to talk to at least two of these people. Most of them have moved out of the state by now. Don't want to talk, scared to death. But one of the guys that I talked to, I mean, his mind was shambles. I mean, he was just. Uh, it was amazing what this did to him, and even in his latter years. Who knows what else has gone on in his life since? But it was shocking to say the least. And then I started seeing that this is all over the place. This isn't just in Evansville. I'm sure that in any big city, if you look hard enough, you're going to find something identical. And you said you're from LA. I mean,
Mhm.
you live in the epicenter of evil right there. I'm sure
Yeah.
this goes on, many blocks
Yeah.
there in LA, worse than Evansville. Evansville's got some dark stuff, but some of these cities out here are way worse. I mean, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, no. I believe you have that on your website too, so people can go and look that up.
Yeah.
It's actually the perfect segue because I recently, yes, I lived in Southern California, and I lived near an area called Manhattan Beach, and I recently did a podcast on the McMartin preschool case. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
exactly what was going on in Evansville. And
Yeah.
it kind of leads into what I want to talk with you about today because there was all this talk about these underground tunnels under LA. And in my opinion, I believe that these tunnels probably led right into the heart of Los Angeles, Hollywood, etc. These kids were put into this courtroom. I mean, their stories were rather, and these people got off, and these kids were saying all of these things that, like what happened at the Blue House, and it just makes me sad because these kids are telling a story. This stuff is real. It happens,
Yeah.
and so kind of leading into what I wanted to talk with you about today are these underground tunnels and these tunnel systems throughout not only our country, but all over the world. And you recently did a midnight ride with David, and you talked about a man named Sheffield. You talked about
Yeah.
these kind of underground serpent cities in Los Angeles. Can you kind of pull back the veil on that a little bit and tell us what that's all about?
Yeah. So I guess 1933, a geophysicist named Sheffield uh, did started drilling, and I guess he had seen these tunnels on some kind of radar, started drilling through there, and really discovered these tunnels. Now, if the story is to be believed, which I believe that it's true, I know that there have been um, I've seen recently just people that going underneath the city and crawling through all kinds of tunnels and finding places that they didn't know existed. So I believe it exists. Also, like when you look into ancient stories of this. This is a common story. It's also biblical. It's a biblical story of inhabitants that inhabit the earth, right? Cain is said to inhabit the earth. He was going into the earth. Um, and when you look at almost every civilization, you have the story of these people that lived under the ground. And sometimes they're described as reptiles. Now, the reptiles could be um, allegorical in a way. You know, there could be an allegorical presence to the idea that they're reptiles. But the fact that these places have been found, you know, like I think you mentioned the Grand Canyon in one of your questions.
Yeah.
You know, they have these places that they found inside the earth that hold resources that seem like they should be out of Egypt, that seem like they should be from another country and not America. But when you kind of get into the, I guess the history ruled the world, it's the same families that ruled the world in every country. Whether you have a society full of South Americans at the top, it was always these redheaded, blue-eyed people, right? Or blonde-headed, blue-eyed, big people. No matter what civilization, even in Africa, these were the rulers, right? You see the Africans still trying to mimic some of these things, like the Anunnaki were long-necked people, right? They had long necks. And so you still see the people trying to mimic that long neck and doing these things. So the reason you find the same religions based all over the world is because that all of these are Canaanite religions that came from Babylon, right? And they may have changed names or whatever, but they are, and when I say change names, it's because the languages are changed, but they're based on the same principles. They're based on a serpent. They're based on beings that live underground, and there's stories about these beings actually being a salvation point for people during the floods. They took them underneath, like the Hopi. Their story is that these beings took them under the ground, and after the flood, let them back up, taught them technology. And that's the same story you get from like Genghis Khan, for instance, Attila the Hun, all of these rulers that were phenomenal men in more ways than one. And I'm not saying it in a positive way, but they were smarter than everybody else. They were stronger than everybody else, and they were able to rule because of that. And they taught people civilization. They taught people how to do these things. You know, at one time there was just people running around living in tents all over the place, and these men were able to come in and civilize things, which obviously was for their own gain. But this is what they did. So the idea of people living underground is widespread throughout every civilization. And I believe that LA has very strong spiritual ties to the occult in so many ways. You know, I did a show a long time ago about Hollywood, called Hollywood, the City of Fallen Angels, I believe is what I called it.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that one was
a good
interesting.
one.
And there was a lot of stuff that in it that I wish I could kind of recover, but like they had, you know, this town in Hollywood is set up after Lake Nemi, right? It's in Rome. And there was a time when Caligula would bring all of these people to this Lake Nemi. They call it Diana's Mirror there. And if you look at a picture of it and you look at a picture of Hollywood, it's just almost identical. And a lot of the towns are named similarly after that. But they would bring all the dignitaries, all the powerful people of the world into this lake, and they would announce them as stars, right? So that they would be worshipped among the stars forever. And they would also offer a sacrifice. They would sacrifice unsuspecting people that showed up and kill those people. And in LA, you have a similar thing. You have people going there because they want to be known as stars. And then you have the unsuspecting people that go there and just get their life ravaged and become puppets. And that's pretty much the extent of their lifestyle is puppetry, you know? And so you have this mentality of, hey, I'm doing a show right now, David. I'm sorry. That's all right, David. David just showed up. Say hi, David.
Hi, David.
But yeah, so you have these people that go there and they become sacrifices, probably get cloned. Who knows what else happens to them? And then you have these elite group of vampires, I believe, that are continual throughout time, that are living there, presenting themselves as human, controlling the show, eating children, doing all these horrible things that is, I think that a lot of people would be surprised if they understood the workings of these cities. And I know that
Yeah.
you probably got more experience in knowing about this stuff than I do, but some of the things I've heard, some of the stories that have been told to me by former actors or whatever that have just blown my mind. I can't believe it. And you see people coming out about it right now,
Yeah.
actually coming out and saying it publicly, risking their life to say it, and people think they're crazy.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, just you talking, I'm like, I have like four questions. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Well, okay. You touched on a couple of things that I just kind of want to touch on briefly. I find it interesting going back to that show you talked about where you really uncovered Hollywood and its roots and its ties to Italy, right? Lake
Yes.
Nimi. But notice how they all congregated around the waters. I always find that interesting in
Yeah.
relation to kind of the marine stuff and the
Yeah.
water symbolism. You touched on that recently within the last month or so with David. But
Yeah.
there's something more a spiritual aspect there too that I think is really interesting. And um, here's my question though. Are these what's your opinion? I mean, maybe you don't have a complete answer. Some of it obviously is speculation, but
Right.
like have these just been these creatures, if you will, for lack of another name, have they just been around since the flood, or are they created in underground dumps, or how does that all work in your opinion?
Okay, I'll
Loaded
try to unpack.
question.
Yeah, I would love to be like I have a for sure answer, but I will give you the best speculation that I have, the way that I've been able to put this
Okay.
together. So I believe since the very beginning, since the beginning of mankind, these entities have been here, they've been known as the Watchers, and they left their first estate. They did something they weren't supposed to do by mating with women and creating their offspring, which were basically still to this day the enemies of mankind. And I think that there are also other creatures that we aren't privy to, that maybe the stories of these old creatures that the Bible talks about and all these other mythical, what we call mythical religions talk about are in fact true.
Right.
In the Bible, it says that after the flood, that he wiped out everything that breathed air on the flood. And interestingly enough, when you get post flood and you see these Nephilim creatures again, all of them claim lineage from a sea beast. All of them do. And you even have like the legends of Poseidon, all of these same legends, same person, entity,
Mhm.
whatever. And so I believe personally that these beings that lived through the water, even Nephilim that were able to survive through the water, came back afterwards and continue to copulate
Yep.
with other beings. Now they could have just been Nephilim. They may not have been the angels, because I think after the angels, the punishment that they received, it was even Michael, in the book of Enoch was like, you know,
Yeah.
this is shocking. Of course, he didn't utter a word before God. He says I would never utter a word, but it was just shocking to them. And so I think that a lot of them probably, knowing that that would be their fate if they did that, probably didn't do that right after that. They might right today, knowing that their time is short. Who knows what they're going to do? But back then, I believe that these were Nephilim. These were water beings of some sort, water spirits. And of course, we have the elementals. So water plays a huge role in the worship of elementals, which is huge in Druidism. This is a big portion of what they worship. In Galatia, when Paul was speaking to the Gauls, he says, "Who's bewitched you?" And he's talking about chasing after the elements, right? This is what it's talking about. They were going after the elements. And interestingly enough, the Gaul religion, the Druid religion, and the religion of Judaism are super similar. There's not a whole lot of difference. In Judaism, I'm not talking about the Bible, like the Bible believing Jews that believe the Bible only, and not Talmud and Kabbalah and all that. But Druidism and Judaism, in my opinion, when I look at it, two different languages, same religion, right? So
Yeah.
this is when Paul is warning them about the party of circumcision. Guess what? The Galatians or the Druids did that as well. So this was I'm not saying that circumcision is wrong by any means. All cultures, I think, at one point did this to show, like, cleanliness, also to show that they're, kind of sacrificing their flesh, pleasure, for whatever, for that. And obviously the Bible talks about that, but the similarities there between these two religions are magnificent. Of course, you say that, people will say you're racist, but I'm just speaking as somebody that has studied both religions pretty heavily. And whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you. But I personally believe that that is the case. So you have these water spirits, you have these water beings that show up. Now, the first beast in Revelation is the beast that comes out of the water. Interestingly enough, all of these bloodlines that we can tie all the way to King Charles right now, and even beyond King Charles, William, William's son George, whatever, they all claim to be from the Merovingian kings. Well, the Merovingian kings claim lineage from a sea serpent, and before the Merovingian kings were the Fisher kings. And the reason they were called Fisher kings is because they came from the sea serpent, right? And even before that, you have a group of the Hyksos kings and all of that same kind of thing, and they all claim this lineage. And you can read about some of that stuff in Lawrence Gardner's books, because he actually was the genealogist for a lot of these people. And 33rd degree Freemason, director of antiquities for Scotland, has a good hate for the God of the Bible, but at the same time, when it comes to genealogies and stuff, he tells the kind of lore behind all of the genealogies. And so, when you have like Disney, who's trying to continue the stories, they continue the stories of the elf lines, the elf bloodlines, and the dragon bloodlines, and all of these different things. But ultimately, these bloodlines all have basis in fact. I don't think they all look like reptilians, or they even have maybe even any physical features of reptilians. It's possible. I know people have presented videos that show people possibly shape shifting or whatever, and videos are hard to judge. It's one of those things that, like, I would almost have to see it with my own eyes. Like, if I'm physically there with somebody and they shift into a reptilian, right? Because you've done video for a while, I've done video for a while. It doesn't take much for a video to shift, and you can CGI something and make people look completely crazy. But these bloodlines they believe this, right? They believe this. I believe this too. I believe that they know who they come from. I believe that's why they intermarry only. They have a specific bloodline that they want to keep. The more of this blood, because they believe they come from New Anunnaki, the more of this blood, the more they feel like they have power to rule over things. And of course, that is the case now, at least in their own mind. Being a king it's not something you earn. This is something you're born with, right? You're born, and you're born into kingship. Going back into just a little bit, I've found a connection, or I found a disconnect in history that I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but it all kind of ties in here, because through these lines of Fisher kings, Merovingian kings, and ultimately the Pendragons, which means King Dragon, you have this character called King Arthur that comes forth, and this is during the Dark Ages. And the more I study the Dark Ages, the more I believe that they didn't exist. I believe, because you can't find hardly any archaeological evidence for the Dark Ages, for the early Middle Ages. King Arthur's not a real person, but yet he's the only history for the Britain during that time. There's no other history for these people. So they're trying to hide something. I think his character connects with the Dragon King Attila the Hun in some way, but they definitely all tie to water. Water is a huge thing. And I believe too that this is where most of the UFOs that we see are coming from the water. They're coming from there. There's so much in the water that we don't know about. No. And of course, we have this interesting thing that just recently happened with the billionaires going underneath the water. But there's so much to it. I don't even know how to answer it fully, because there's more of a mystery there than I understand. That's for sure. I wish I could say that I understood it. I know there's people that will pretend like they understand every bit of it, but I just can't pretend like it. All I can say is this is based on like stuff I've studied, and I can see it in that. Now, I know that there's people that have witnessed more, and I'm not saying they're lying at all. I'm just saying that me personally, this is what I gather from it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think what you're saying is excellent, because what we have to do, and this is what I try to show on my page, on my podcast, is like, we don't have all the answers. We have to be teachable, humble. We have to have an open mind and the discernment of the Holy Spirit to guide us through some of these kind of, for lack of another word, fringe maybe type topics where there is mystery still there. It's this kind of revealing of these mysteries that the word is giving us. And so it's exciting. It's fun, because you get to look at some of these things with fresh eyes. I mean, you mentioned the water and how it's all kind of derived from the water. I just recently did a I had titled it The Marine Kingdom. I did a workshop, but
Oh, nice.
essentially, yeah, I mean, just digging into that, I mean, you would be just totally aloof if you didn't see so many tie-ins back to Oannes and these fish gods and
Yeah.
the worship of these
Yeah.
waters. I mean, you can't deny it when you really start
Yeah.
to dig in. And so there's so many questions I want to ask you, but
I mean, that brings up, when you talk about
yeah, go ahead.
Awanas, is something I forgot to mention that I think is really important, because
Yeah.
Awanas, aka Dagon,
Mhm.
was worshipped by the Palestinians. And in the Bible, um, there's a cryptic verse that talks about the root of the serpent would be the cockatrice, and it's in association with Palestine. So that tie is super important in understanding this, because Palestine, I guess, if you look at like the Assyrian and how that all ties in, it's majorly ties into the New World Order, into the offspring of their heritage. So
Wow.
interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I just wanted to
Yeah.
mention that, because I really try to get people interested in reading the Bible, because
Yeah.
it's like a lot of times you think, well, the Bible's just boring, a bunch of do this, do that, but there's so much in there that can
Oh,
be tied. Yeah.
it's so cool. I mean, it's amazing to see all the connections and just like even seeing all the water references and all the dominion that God showed in the Old and Jesus in the New Testament
Yeah.
of the dominion over the waters. And why was he executing this dominion? He was showing he was in control of creation. It's my river, Pharaoh, essentially,
Right.
right? So it's really neat to see all this stuff. And so you brought up the dragons and also the UFOs coming up out of the water. And this kind of, my mind is all over the place, but to
Yeah.
kind of keep it on this similar track. Do you, I mean, all throughout antiquity, you see this worship of dragons, and you
Mm.
see even in Revelation, the great dragon, right? So
Yeah.
does that tie into kind of this serpent race? I mean, is there a connection there? Can you
Yeah.
extrapolate on that?
I think so, because
Yeah.
the seraphim are mentioned in the scripture, and they're the what that means is fiery serpent.
Yeah.
I definitely think they're tied in majorly in this, and this is why the term dragon is probably more apt than the term dinosaur. Like, I believe that the what we're finding, some of these things that we're finding are in fact dragons of sort. And we, of course, the images of these dinosaurs that we see aren't necessarily based on the evidence that they find, right? Some of the skin that they give them, or whatever, we don't know what their skin looked like. We don't know exactly how every bit of them looked. In fact, most of the dinosaur fossils are partial, right? So people are just kind of coming up things. There's so many different ideas about how many different dinosaurs there were, which is, in my opinion, through my investigation, a bunch of bull. Because I mean, there's really only a couple skeletons that they found
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
skeletons of, like the T-Rex, for instance. And T-Rex is an interesting creature. And it even has cavities that look like it could possibly be where that aren't normally there on any other creature, that look like it could be a fire breathing thing. We don't know if they had wings. We don't know any of those things. So like there are that, and I do believe that reptilian the reptilian worship is huge too.
Yeah.
There's a huge reptilian worship. Um, and the reason that dragons are only thought of negatively, I think, in people who are believers and people who are like Hebrews and stuff, because most religions in the world actually make the dragon to be out this image of wisdom, right?
Right.
The dragon is wisdom. The dragon brings us wisdom, which is of course what Eve and Adam thought, right? The dragon brings wisdom. And so the worship of the dragon comes naturally to most civilizations, I would say, especially Eastern civilizations.
Right.
As far as whether or not they're still around, I believe that there probably are. There's places in the world that are uninhabitable, unable to be reached by normal humans. That is, I think that obviously some of the governments and secret organizations that are working together with these entities have made it to these places. But I definitely think that there are these entities, and there's so many different, like, even in the book of, I'm trying to think, I think it was Daniel. It's like in the apocryphal version of Daniel. There's this dragon called Bel, or yeah, Bel, I believe is the name of the dragon, and um, everybody's terrified of it because it keeps destroying all the towns. And I can't remember all the story. You can read it for yourself. It's not that long, but Daniel comes up with this idea. He's like, look, if I can kill this dragon, will you do this? Let me do this or whatever. I can't remember the negotiation that took place before it, but he makes this big thing of fat and hair. And he gets this big lump of fat and hair, and they go feed it to this dragon, and it kills the dragon because of all the hair in the lump.
Right.
And so there's stories of it in the scripture. Of course, the dragon, like you said, the red dragon mentioned in Revelation is associated with Satan himself. And so definitely there's the seraphim tie to that. And how what they exactly look like, I'm not 100% sure. I think that dragon is a good viewpoint. Probably, I think that might be literally what they look like, is dragons.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree. I think that, like I said, just doing this previous study I did, it was mind blowing how much these ancient cultures would worship these dragon serpent type creatures, and the tie to the water as well.
yeah, yeah,
It's just, there's so much more there that I think that us as believers just need to have an open mind. And, kind of
yeah,
before we jump into like the UFO stuff and the underground stuff, because I want to talk about a couple things there.
yeah.
How do you, or what do you tell people who are like, oh my gosh, this isn't in the Bible, it's not true, you're making this out to be fringe? And how do you kind of navigate that conversation with people?
Oh man, I've been trying to master this one for years, but
Yeah.
um, really, I've just ultimately come to accept the fact that most people are going to snub what I say, or and then there's going to be the scattered few that latch onto it
Yeah.
because it rings and it resonates in their ears, and they understand because they are the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Bible, Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice."
Yeah.
And so when the word goes out, whether it's just, one of us measly humans that say something that rings in somebody's ears, or, it could be anything. I mean, there's so many ways God talks to people, but, I've just come to accept the fact that I won't be accepted by much. There's things about this lifestyle they're really hard to deal with in the physical, and that's one of them. Sometimes family don't want to be around you, or they think you're crazy, or my family doesn't necessarily think I'm crazy, but they also feel judged by my lifestyle. Like, and I'm not trying to bash on anybody in my family specifically. I just say that my lifestyle of not wanting to be drunk, or not wanting to, you know, do the things that they do, or, whatever. Just there's all these different things. Like, they feel judged, even if I don't judge them. Like, they feel judged because I don't do those things.
Sure.
And so I've just learned to accept it. I've learned to accept it, like, business wise, it's going to be harder, and this is just an example, but like with Now You See TV, when we started doing YouTube before the adpocalypse is what they call it, before they started like really getting people in there to try to snuff people out. And in advertisements alone, we only had like 20,000 subscribers, and we were doing like, and this is just to throw out kind of numbers here, like 7,000 a month in advertisements coming in Now You See TV, which isn't a ton, but at the time it was, it was everything. And then, we got demonetized, just boom, demonetized,
Yeah.
no questions, no way to come back from it. Just let's demonetize them. And then so now fast forward to today, we're 10 times that, 10 times the numbers
Mm.
that we had. So we would, if we were still being monetized, we would make roughly $70,000 per month off YouTube, which would be huge. Like, if I had $70,000 a month budget for documentaries and such, I mean,
Oh
it'd
my
be mind
gosh.
blowing. But of course, they want to push us down. So
Yeah.
learning to accept that has been hard,
Yeah.
because there's times when I just wanted to go find the CEO of YouTube and just punch her in the face, even though she's a girl. I'm like, I would punch her in the face. Like, she's literally like ruining people's lives. So like,
Yeah.
there were times when I was like, in my mind, just kind of mad about it, but I've learned to accept it. I've learned to understand that God is the only one that ultimately can open the eyes, cause the seeds that we present to people to grow.
Yeah.
And so I just have to accept that.
No,
So
I agree. And I'm right there with you, because I remember when I first started, it was like, you're crazy. I would get the messages, when I first started my Instagram page 7 years ago,
yeah,
and you're crazy, beep, 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 all this stuff. But as the years progress, there more and more people are starting to come into this understanding. And really, those that have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, that are seeking
Yeah,
it out and are teachable and humble. I think that is such a huge part of it is you don't know it all. And we've got to be able to kind of come with open hands and be like, okay, I'm ready to learn. Just be a constant student of the word is really the key. But kind of leads me into my next question to you. And
sure.
I'm right on the same page with you and David about biblical cosmology. I believe we lived in a fixed, stationary, immovable earth with a
Yeah,
firmament over us. And so, my understanding of what I think, and I want to hear your opinion, is
for sure.
that it is almost a magic trick. Look up, not down. Everything you mentioned, the UFOs coming up out of the water, and there's been reports of them coming like up out of lakes and out of, up from
Yeah,
under. And so it's almost like NASA and these kind of, big companies and organizations that push this kind of stuff want us to look up, want us to
yeah,
believe in this kind of never ending rather, galaxy. Um,
yeah.
and really, there's a lot more going on underneath us. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so yeah, I believe that 100%. And so my thoughts on this are interesting because I just found something in the Bible that I kind of touched on a little bit last week that really I've just passed over a dozen times, and even in the book of Enoch passed over it a dozen times. But in Revelation 20, it talks about Gog and Magog and them coming from the four quarters of the earth, not the corners, right? It says the four quarters.
Yeah.
And Ezekiel 38 talks about that as well, but they come from the four quarters of the earth. Now, I had to think about that. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what does the four quarters of the earth mean? Because I've heard four corners, and I thought, well, a lot of people are tying it in. Well, Britain owns like a quarter of the world's nations, so they're talking about Britain. A lot of people are like, well, they're coming from all the corners and coming together. And so I happen to, I've been doing a Book of Enoch kind of commentary, going through the entire Book of Enoch, and um, there's a chapter 77, that actually discusses what the four quarters of the earth are.
Mm.
And it's not the way I thought it was, right? Not the way that I would have pictured him. And I've even read this verse and just passed right over in Enoch 77. But there's a north quarter, which is where the kingdom of men dwell. This
Mm-hmm.
is where the kingdom of men dwell. This is where the waters are. And then there's the south, which is under, which it says this is where Jesus will descend, and those who are blessed will descend with him. That we're talking under. And then we have a west that is, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing. There's more to these places, but there's west where there's this huge wall of fire that says it persecutes the luminaries. It also, you have Abraham's bosom, where you have a valley of where the people that are bad went and the people that are good go, and they're waiting there for the eternal judgment, right? Or waiting there till whatever happens. You even see he even makes note that he asks the angel, he said, who is that keeps coming and making petition to God? And he said, that's Abel, who was slain by Cain. And so you have that, and then you have the east end too, and you have all of these different, in Enoch chapter, I believe it's 22, it starts in there. That's where he describes the different quarters.
Mm-hmm.
Enoch 77 talks about it. Enoch 22 describes the different places that Enoch was taken to look at here. And I believe that a lot of the reason that they don't want us looking down into the hollow earth and the idea of hollow earth is because they're hiding out there. There's people
Yeah.
hiding out in these places. And, for instance, in Enoch, he does talk about this one place he goes inside the earth, and he sees this beautiful place with a mountain, and he sees this accursed valley, and there's nobody in it yet or anything like that. But he asked the angels, what is this? And he said, this is the place where one day the people who denied my name, they will be in this cursed valley over here, but they'll thank me because at least it's something, right? They'll thank me. And then this other place is where the people who are blessed forever will, live. And so there's all these different places that it talks about. So I believe personally, and this is just my opinion, 100%, but there seems to be a escape of a lot of these beings that ruled the earth at one time. These tall, Aryan type looking beings that ruled on earth, and because they were persecuted, right? They were like driven out. You even have stories about them coming over to America, killing them and stuff like that. I believe that they left and went to another place. They left and maybe took advantage of the knowledge of this chasm
Mhm.
and started living this chasm. Now you see like people like Hitler, made it their life's goal to find these places, to go
Yeah.
into the vicinity there, to go to Antarctica, to go find the spear of destiny, to do these things, which is something that if I was a billionaire, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd go and try to find through there, somehow figure out a way to make it past all the red tape to try to do all these things. And I believe that he had the power, was given the power to do these things. If you look at Admiral Byrd's secret diary, where he goes inside the earth, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that story before.
Yes, I have. It's pretty
Yeah,
fantastic, but at this
yeah,
point, I'm like, I have an open mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And well, he it was published a year before his death.
Hmm.
Of course, people tried to discredit the man, even though he was an admiral. He was the highest rank. Nobody said anything bad about him until he published these books. But
Yeah.
he said it was true, right? And then supposedly you can find this article. Well, they questioned him, and he said he embellished. And I'm just like, well,
Yeah.
I didn't hear that from him, so whatever. I just know that he wrote this. Whether it's true or not, 100%, I have no idea. But in the story, he explains that he went there. His instruments were taken over. He was taken underground by this UFO that had a swastika on it. And of course, we know
Yeah.
that the Nazis had UFO type crafts with swastikas. They claimed to be in contact with these beings, and they were trying to create a master race
Right.
based off the DNA of these beings.
Right.
And so, like, they had these. Um, I guess what I'm trying to say is like this is something that is very possible, not 100% verifiable unless I could go there myself, but I would say that there's enough evidence for me to believe that something weird is going on. Even with
Yeah.
Bird going to Antarctica, Operation High Jump and all this stuff, there's questions left unanswered there. Shortly after this is why when they developed this treaty where normal people like me and you are not allowed to explore, and other countries aren't even allowed to go and do that. And Bird recorded like that they encountered things that they couldn't understand, couldn't get by, sounds, noises,
Yeah.
troops, whatever. They described these things that were happening, and um, I can't, I can't, I guess discredit that idea. I believe that there is very possible that what we know as the dwelling place of Earth is only the north end, the
Yeah.
north, what it talks about in the north, only the land where men dwell, but there are more beyond the ice walls. I believe that. And I believe that underneath there is more.
Yeah.
And I think that they take advantage of that knowledge. This is one of the reasons I think that a lot of our history has been
Mm.
taken away,
Yeah.
is because they are taking advantage of this knowledge, not only to be able to have access to these places, but also to enslave mankind. Because if you have knowledge, knowledge is power. And I know, you hear that all the time, but how does that work in real life? If you understand the cycles, if you understand what's getting ready to take place, the cycles of the earth, that realizing that the earth spans in ages, ages happen, the earth gets destroyed, new things happen, judgment happens, and then a new government rises up. See, they understand these things because they're ancient. They're
Yeah.
ancient beings that have been around for a long time. Of course, there's humans that are, the people we see, but they're just the puppets. But they've been doing this a long time, so they understand these cycles. And what I think happened in this last cycle, that they hid knowledge from us so that they could rule us. And
Yeah.
I think that yeah, I really do. I think that's the whole scheme of things. In order for them to rule us, they had to change the way we see the Bible and our dispensation, how we see the Bible.
Sure.
They had to change the nature of what the world looks like. It can't be a flat Earth anymore, otherwise their whole thing falls apart.
Right.
So they had to change that. They had to change how we see where we came from. We had to we come from evolution. We come from monkeys.
Mhm.
All of that, and that affects people's psyche big time. If you
Yes.
tell somebody, like, if let's say one day you wake up, you don't remember anything at all, and somebody comes in and be like, yeah, you were a drug addict, and
Yeah.
your life didn't amount to much, and really all your family's left you, and you've just been a horrible person your whole life.
Hmm.
Versus saying, man, you were just the most amazing person. You gave so much to so many people. You've raised amazing family. You've done all of these things. How you see yourself matters.
Yeah.
100% matters. And they've chose to suppress things and suppress how we see ourselves. And this goes for all people, but even, just look at the the blacks, for instance, the African Americans that are in America, they have been ravished by money, people trying to make money off of them,
Oh
whether it be
yeah.
through drugs, etc. And they have basically given them this history that they're just nothing but slaves. Now, that's not 100% true. In fact, yeah, there were slaves and there were that, but that's not where they came from. They're people just like anybody else. Their own people enslaved them, sent them off, but they don't tell them all the parts that are
Right.
relevant, right? To relevant to, because I mean, if you believe you're just a slave, you've always been enslaved, and you're never going to be any good. You're always going to be making excuses. You're always going to be asking people for this and for that, and we all know this. We should anyway. That making excuses is never a good way to do the right thing or to come up, right? In order to succeed, you can't make excuses anymore. You have to just move forward and
Yeah.
do things. Even if you make a mistake, you move forward and you do things. And you can't blame other people, because if you blame other people, then you're not taking responsibility in your own way, because, ultimately we're responsible for our situations on mostly. And then sometimes not, if you're a child born into a horrible home, even that is not even when you're adult. And I don't know, I've gone through things as a child, but as an adult, I had to see things for what they were and see, like, look, this is in the past.
Yeah.
This happened to me, but it's not happening to me right now. In fact, I can look at it almost like it was a movie, and I can learn from it, and I can move forward in the situation. I feel like I got an education on something
Right.
that I didn't have to pay for, and it's over with now. I'm not getting it now. It's over with, and it happened, and I can learn from it, and I can make sure that, this doesn't happen to other people, etc. So, like, the way we look at things is huge. And so, and people are always like, why would they change the history? It's not going to do it. It matters.
It
Everything,
does.
every bit of it matters 100%. It's like an enchantment. This
Yes.
is an enchantment. This is exactly what enchantment is. It's creating false narratives
Mm-hmm.
and allowing people to live those false narratives. And there's a show that was on, and I've talked about it before, but I can't remember the name of it, but it was like Happily Ever After, I think, or something like that. Or it was about this town that they were all storybook characters, all of them, like Cinderella, etc., all these different ones. And this evil queen had set up this enchantment to where they didn't remember who they were. They were all working in restaurants, living everyday bustle of life, and they were in domed. They couldn't leave this town. They didn't even know they couldn't leave this town, but there was a
Right.
dome set around this town to where they couldn't leave. And so they never really truly could understand who they were, but some of them were princesses, some of them were kings, some of them were this. And I equate that to everyday life now. A lot of people that are believers don't realize that, we are considered a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people called forth. And the power that we have because of that is immense.
Mm-hmm.
And if people only knew the power they had because of that, then the world would change. But the problem is we've been so dumbed down by the church to be lukewarm.
Yep.
Well, we don't have the power to do this. We can't even talk about politics in our church. We can't do this and that. And they become pansies, to a point to where they're not living in the power of a royal priesthood. A royal priesthood has power, especially when you can communicate with the high priest.
Mm.
This is probably the reason me and you aren't dead yet, right? Because we have the power to communicate with the high priest and make a prayer to the creator of all kind, because his will can be done on earth as well as is in heaven if he chooses, right?
Yep. No, it's so good. I love what you're saying. I want to touch on the knowledge part, because I think that it's so critical what you said. It's, if they can control the narrative, if they can get in your mind and condition you and program you and get you to say the same thing over and over and over again, it's Project Mockingbird, right? It's this repetition. Then you will start to adapt and you will start to believe it. But the hard part is breaking out of that paradigm. And really that comes with the Holy Spirit, because he's got to he's a spirit of truth. And so when you have that, you have the ability to say, wait a second, I have to question the narrative. I either believe the Bible or I believe man. What am I going to do? I've got to make the choice here. And with the whole hollow earth and the, flat earth, biblical cosmology, whatever you want to say it, this was mind shattering for me. I mean, this was one of my, I guess you would call it red pills, one of them. And it changed everything for me. And so when people say, oh, it's not a salvation issue, it's not a salvation issue, but Timothy tells us that all scripture is used for reproof and, doctrine and learning. And so it changes people. it
Yes.
changes you. And so when you
Yeah.
start to kind of move into this truth that the Bible is true, it breaks open, it shatters the magic trick. And I think this is what, to your point, it's an enchantment.
Yeah.
They want to get in your mind. They want to try to manipulate you. And if you can shift your perspective, and if you can realize and renew your mind, then in Christ, you will start to see the world for what it is. And I don't
That's
know.
so true.
It's powerful, just like you said. It's powerful because you're just like,
Yeah.
you're immovable. You're like an oak tree, Come
Yeah.
on. Like
Yeah.
I got the most high on my side. Like, what do you want to do? Kind of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, I mean,
That's so true. Like,
yeah,
with the earth thing, like that, it is a huge point for a lot of people.
yeah,
You're not the only one. You know that there's been literally thousands of people that have humbled themselves before God when they realize what we're living on.
yeah,
How
yeah,
can you not? How can you not when you know that you are the in fact center of the universe? You are the reason all of this exists, and
right.
it blows my mind. But if people were really honest with themselves, anybody listening that's like skeptical or say we're you want to think we're crazy, if you're honest with yourself, the only information you have about the world we live in is based off hearsay, what other people say about it. If you really do the calculations and look at the things yourself and look at what the Bible says, if you believe the Bible, you'll see that it's not a globe's heliocentric. It's not describing this; it's describing an enclosed
Yeah,
system, and so everything you're believing is based off of science, which I would call it science falsely so called.
yeah,
And when you look at, I mean, it's just amazing. But I don't have to tell you you're preaching the choir, but you have to realize that you have to be honest with yourself. It was hard for me at first when I heard it. My friend Rob, who passed away, Rob Skiba,
yeah.
when he started talking about it, I was like, oh no, man. I was like, oh, dude, this is gonna like discredit everything he's ever done. And I remember thinking that, and I didn't even listen to it, but I had a friend and his name was Dan. He's like, dude, just listen to it. Like, check it out. And he's like, just see what you think. He's like, I don't know what to think. He's like, just listen to it. Like, it's interesting what he's saying. And so I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not going to listen to it, but I was like, I am going to look in the Bible and see what it says about the earth. And
Right.
so I looked at that, and then I watched this video, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm sorry. I even apologized to God for even thinking that what NASA or what any of these other organizations said was true, knowing that there are liars all around in every which shape or form.
Right.
But it was crazy. It was weird. It's a humbling moment to
Yeah.
realize that you can be so wrong
Oh,
about something so simple.
so true. So true.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say this all the time. I mean, they, in air quote, did a good job. They did
Yeah.
a good job at indoctrinating us from the minute we stepped into kindergarten. You got the spinning globe on the teacher's desk, and so
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're kind of veering off topic, but I just find it fascinating how this all ties in together. I mean, you can kind of go left and right and weave in and out of these rabbit holes, but it all comes back to the word of God. And
Yeah.
guys, it's exciting. I mean, you see a lot of truthers out there that like to bring out what they believe is this truth. But if it doesn't go back to God's word and it doesn't go back to him, that's our foundation. And so
Mm-hmm.
there may be partial truth in that, but it's not the full truth. And so when you want to come into this full truth, that's where you find it from. So I have one
Yeah.
more question for you, John, and I could talk to
Okay.
you all day, honestly, but I'm
Yeah.
sure you
We'll
have
have to do
other
it
stuff
again.
to do. Yes, definitely.
I'd love to hear your testimony one day too. So we'll have to
Oh,
maybe we'll have to go
thank
back and
you.
forth.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love that. I would love that. I want to end with this though, because my kind of wheelhouse that I kind of found myself in, it is what it is, but it kind of tying it back to these kind of Hollywood celebrities, these kind of people that are propped up in our society that a lot of our society idolize.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about kind of everything we've talked about? Do they know? Do these celebrities and these, top politicians and maybe obviously the royals, but are they in on it? Are they part of this kind of hybrid race, if you will, or bloodline people? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that celebrities fall in kind of different categories here. There are the normal people who go out to Hollywood wanting to be celebrities and working towards that. And I think that unfortunately a lot of those people get they see this, the glitz, the glamour, and they're willing to do anything for it. I know people like that. I know
Yeah.
people who have been in that boat and are in that boat. Um, they're not lizard people. They're not like, fallen angels, but they desired money and fame so much that they were willing to kind of do anything for it.
Right.
And their fear of losing that is so strong that they are willing to probably say whatever, based on, are they going to get this next movie? Are they going to get this or that? There's a lot of fear in that system. And the only reason I even know that is just because I used to be involved in the music scene.
Yeah.
And there's gangsters in there, like real life gangsters that are just evil people that don't care about you, right? They're there. And I know Hollywood's way worse. It's got to be. And so I think that there are those unfortunate that we need to pray for, that are there, that are being used,
Hmm.
abused, and a lot of it has to do. A lot of it's their own fault. Yeah, I believe that. They have, because if you love money so much and fame so much that you're willing to do anything for it, ultimately that's on you, right? That's on the people that do it. And do I think God will forgive people? Obviously, I think he will. He forgave me. If he forgives me, he'll forgive any of those people as well. But I think there are those that are in Hollywood that are actually either fallen angels themselves, or they are completely empowered by fallen angels. And I don't know what else goes on there. I've heard of cloning stories. I've heard of all these different things, which may or may not be true. I've heard of the transgender or the trans investigations, to where they play multiple roles, which is something that's probably true. That this is the kind of things that they used to do in theater, right?
Right.
Men always played the female parts, etc. So would they adapt that and try to make it, for today? I'm sure they would, in any way they can do to, if they can make a man lust after another man on accident, I'm sure
Right.
they'd be thrilled about that, right? So
Yeah.
I think that stuff goes on now. In politicians, I think a lot of them are 100% lapdogs, puppets, human puppets. Most of those guys that want, they're in the same boat as a celebrity. They want to rule because maybe they didn't have any rule in their own life, or maybe they were nerds growing up, or maybe they want to have power. They want there's some reason. I think people that want that stuff shouldn't rule. First off, I think they shouldn't be allowed to rule. I think the people that don't want to do it are the real public servants. Those are the people that should be elected, or people that maybe feel the burden of it and all of that. But instead, we got people that want to do it, people that take bribes, people that take
Yeah.
money from all of these giant organizations. The Bible says the love of money, and let's be clear, the love of money is the
Right.
root of all kinds of evil, right? Not money, but the love of money. And these people love money. They love it so much that they're willing to sell out their own countrymen. They're willing to even sell out their own families. Some of them, you had a question here earlier about Getty Museum, and
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've looked at the bloodline of the Gettys, but man, they've had a lot of tragedy in their family, like big
Yes.
time, like deaths, suicides,
Yep.
kidnappings, all within a couple generations. And um, these people may be, from outside we see glamorous, we see the rat trap with the cheese, but we don't see what happens when they grab the cheese. All we see is what they want you to see.
Right.
These people are miserable. I've met people that are very, very rich and very, very powerful people, and they are miserable, really miserable. Now they might, live in the flesh as often as they can, but when it all comes down, there's miserable. They're so miserable they want to kill themselves. A lot of
Yeah.
people that are like that, and not all of them, but a lot of them. And there's a reason. It's just because they know they've sold themselves out. In order to make that much money, you have to love money. If you got billions of dollars hoarded up, you have to love money, because how could you see? I know if I had $1 billion, it would be really hard for me to see somebody struggling and not do something about it,
Right. Yeah.
because I know I can. I got all the money I need. I could help every person I ever come across if I wanted to with that
Sure.
much money. But yet they keep compiling it, keep hoarding it, keep building and keep hoarding and hoarding and hoarding. And ultimately they're willing to do anything for it. And I've never been a billionaire, but I've been the kind of person that cares about money only. And it really will take you some very dark places. You're almost willing to do anything for it.
Sure.
So, they've been given to reprobate minds, which means they're pleasure seekers. They're seeking after all the things of the world, and they've given up the wielding the spirit or nurturing the spirit in any way. The fruits of the spirit versus the fruits of the flesh in Galatians are pretty cut
Yeah.
line, and they've
Yeah.
gone after the fruits of the flesh.
Yep. Yep. No, you're absolutely right. And it is, I mean, the more you see kind of what's going on in the world, and when you have that lens, like you said, of the fruit of the spirit or the fruit of the flesh, I mean, that is such a great kind of indicator of what people are operating in. I mean, if they're
Yeah.
operating in love and kindness and goodness and joy, and you see that and they want to edify other people and build other people up, that's a good sign that they're really walking with Christ. If they're not,
Yeah.
if they're revengeful and hateful and angry and greedy, I mean, it's cut and dry in my eyes, and I'm sure in yours as
Mhm.
well. And so,
Yeah.
but again, I mean, we can still pray for these people in Hollywood, our politicians, those leaders that are there. We still pray for them. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of wrap this up, I know we got to talk about a whole lot of things, and it's been fun. I really enjoyed it. I just want to give everybody out there some hope. Like, our hope is in Christ, and He is the one that gives us this kind of revelation of all these incredible things going on in our earth and throughout antiquity and in other cultures, and just these kind of, the dragons and the reptiles. I mean, it's so fascinating and it's so
Yeah.
exciting and interesting. So I just encourage all of you guys, check out Jon on Now You See TV on the Midnight Ride with David Carrico. And is there anything else that you want to add, or where else can people find you?
Yeah, you can just type in NYSTV on any search engine. You'll find pretty much most of our stuff, hopefully, unless they've every now and then the algorithm pushes us down.
I
You
know.
wouldn't be able, it's so
Yeah.
weird, and then it'll pop back up. But I think right now, if you look right now, you might find NYSTV on there. But I just want to say, just like you want to leave with encouragement, like I want to leave with encouragement too. I think what you said is beautiful. This world is amazing, right? In certain ways, and it's also fallen.
Yeah.
We live in a fallen world, but like Jesus said, my kingdom's not of this world. So what we're going after is a spiritual kingdom. What we're building is a spiritual kingdom, but yet we are still here on this earth, and it's important to find joy in what you can find joy in. The Bible says the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so, we talk about these topics to wake people up. Amy is the same way, but I can tell she has joy just like I have joy in other parts of her life. And it's important to find those pieces of life that God gives us, because He does bless us so much. I mean, if you really think about what we've been given in this world based on what we could have been given, we have hit the jackpot with life. We've hit the jackpot. And to be able to be thankful for that, to be grateful, it's hard to be unhappy when you're grateful and you're thankful for what you do have, because we could be so much worse. I mean, it's just amazing. And then we've all seen the different pictures of people that, in third world countries. I've actually been and seen some of this stuff, people living in boxes, and it's horrifying, right? It's awful, but we've been given different. And of course, we are some of the most ungrateful people in the world, unfortunately. But being grateful, being able to find joy when joy is there, in between the moments of sorrow, in between the moments of hardship, is so important. And if you're going through something right now, and this is the time, like, realize this. And I think that if you realize this, it's going to help change your perspective in life. God's in control. He's in control of everything that we do, even the times that are annoying to us. Like today, it was really hard for me. I had my dryer go out, my stove went out, our water was they had a boil order or whatever, and our water, um just all the little things, tire stuff, just all in one day. And I'm thinking, like, I could be mad about this, but there might be a reason that God has delayed me for this long. I don't know what it is, but there might be a reason.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to think like that, learn that God is in control, because ultimately, even if all armies are against us, there is a chance and a power that is beyond all that. Greater is He that is in us than he that's in the world. I think of the story with Elisha, where I can't remember the other prophet's name, but the other guy's freaking out because they get all these armies surrounding them. They're just everywhere. And Elisha's just chilling, he's just like, no big deal, whatever. I don't, I'm not worried about it. And the other guy's freaking out. He's like, dude, look at all this stuff going on. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. I don't think they use the word dude, but he's like, look at all this stuff going on. And he's like, and Elisha says, open his eyes so he can see. And so his eyes are open, and he sees these warring angels everywhere, surrounding the armies that are coming for him. And learning that this is highly possible, that our faith really does move mountains.
Mm.
Because if you don't have faith, if you're always worried about what other, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, does that signify faith? I don't think so. I don't think it does. I think if you're anxious all the time, you're worried all the time, your faith is gone.
Mm.
And faith is power. Without faith, with faith, all things are possible.
Right.
So what happens without it, right? Not a lot is possible. You can't even accomplish a mere task without the faith you can accomplish it. Faith is huge. And so have faith, have pride in your king, have pride that he's going to be there for you. I try to pride myself on that fact, because there's many times that I should have been dead, that I should be gone, that whatever the case may be, at the last moment, here comes the king, just like in the last moment for Moses and them, right? They're standing there all freaked out, like the water's not moving, nothing's happening. They're getting ready to get back down, but Moses just waited. He waited. And when the time was right, he lifted his staff and the water spread apart, and so being able to have faith is huge. And I think that if I can not express that, I wish that I could tell you how to have faith, because it's like one of those things is like, I want to have faith,
Right.
but sometimes it's just being willing to let go of your pride, and I think that maybe that's the message I want to leave people with for sure. And because I know it's a message I need every day.
Yeah.
This is something I need to tell myself every day, because there are situations where I'll get behind this slow person in the traffic, or this will happen and that happen. I'll get frustrated and it'll ruin my day. Right. Well, that's because I don't have faith. I don't have, I'm not looking at it in the right way. So I challenge each of you to do that.
I love that. It's true. Good stuff, Jon.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it so much.
No, I have really appreciated this time, and you guys all have to check out Jon if you're not already following him and David on Now You See TV, the Midnight Ride. I love it. I never miss it. And I think you guys are on Rumble now too, right? Because YouTube was kind of getting wonky on you.
Yeah, we try to split. To split like what we do, because some things we already know. Like as soon as we talk about it, we're
the androgyny one.
You
we're
already know what's
over
happen there.
We're moving over to Rumble. Well, this has been awesome. We'll definitely have to do it again. Thank you so much for coming on, and I just appreciate you and all you're doing, your ministry. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it so much, and I'm blessed and honored to be here, and just would love to do it again sometime.
All right. Sounds good. You got a deal. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a good day.